I used to think monsters lived under the bed. Now I know they wear wedding rings. My name is Abbie Patel, and this isn't the story I ever imagined telling the world. It's the story of how I married a man I didn't love and how that decision changed my life forever. It all began in the coldest February I can remember. Chicago was a gray bruise against the sky, buildings swallowed in mist, sidewalks layered with salt and regret. I was 34 weeks pregnant, standing outside a closed diner with a suitcase that didn't even belong to me. The wind was so sharp it felt like it was trying to erase me. I'd lost everything in a single month. My boyfriend, Michael, disappeared the moment the pregnancy test turned positive. My job at the nursing home let me go 2 weeks later, saying something about budget adjustments. And the apartment I'd been barely managing to afford, well, that was gone too after the landlord found out I'd fallen behind. You don't realize how fast life can crumble until you're standing in the debris of it, holding your belly, whispering promises to someone who hasn't even arrived yet. "It's okay, baby," I remember saying, my breath turning white in the air. "Mama's gonna find a way." She always does, but I didn't believe it. Not really. For nights, I slept in Lucy's tiny guest room. She's a nurse, the kind of friend who sees your pain before you speak it. But she had her own life, her own small apartment and rotating night shifts. I could feel I was becoming a burden. Every time I packed and unpacked that suitcase, shame wrapped tighter around my chest. Before I go on, if you're listening to this story, thank you for being here. This is Possible Hearts. Real stories, real hearts, real possibilities. If you're watching from somewhere cold tonight, Chicago, Toronto, maybe Boston, tell me in the comments. I'd love to know where this story is finding you. And if you believe, even a little, that love can grow in impossible places, make sure you subscribe. Because this story, is for you. Back then, love felt like something extinct. I remember the day the hospital's social worker asked if I had a support plan. I laughed, but no sound came out. Support plan, I wanted to say? I barely have a plan to get through the next 24 hours. She handed me a pamphlet for a shelter on the west side. I tucked it in my coat pocket, pretending I'd go. But I didn't. I couldn't bring myself to imagine my baby's first cries echoing against concrete walls and fluorescent lights. That night, as I walked along Michigan Avenue, past couples holding hands and steam rising from sewer grates, I felt invisible. The lights blurred through my tears, and my reflection in a store window startled me. A pale, exhausted stranger with a rounded belly and eyes too wide with fear. That's when I stopped praying for love. I started praying for mercy. Lucy tried to talk sense into me. "You need help, Abbie," she said. "Maybe family, a charity, even temporary housing." I shook my head. My parents were gone. My relatives in Detroit had stopped answering calls after I disappointed them. "There has to be someone," she insisted. "There isn't," I whispered. I think she saw something in my eyes then, a quiet resignation that scared her. The next morning, she slipped an envelope under my door before heading to her shift. Inside was a note. "A man named Patrick Reed came by the hospital yesterday. He's looking for someone. Long story, but I think he might be able to help. He asked for your name specifically. Please, at least hear him out." Patrick Reed. The name sounded like money, like power, like trouble. For a moment, I thought Lucy was joking. I didn't know any Patrick Reed. And why would a stranger be looking for me? But there was a business card attached, heavy paper, embossed lettering, and a phone number scrawled on the back in blue ink. I should have thrown it away. But when you're desperate, logic becomes a luxury. That night, the city howled through the cracks in the window, and I sat by the radiator staring at that card. The ink was slightly smudged, as if the writer's hand had trembled. I traced the name with my finger, whispering it under my breath. Patrick Reed. I don't know what I expected. A savior, maybe. But as I'd soon learn, saviors and monsters often look the same in the dark. I didn't sleep that night. The city kept whispering through the cracks in the window, the hum of traffic, a siren in the distance, the metallic groan of the L train rolling past. I kept turning the card in my hand, reading and rereading the name like it was a riddle. Patrick Reed. The letters looked expensive. By dawn, my stomach felt like it was folding in on itself. I couldn't tell if it was hunger or the baby pressing against my ribs, maybe both. Either way, I dialed the number. A man's voice answered on the second ring, deep, precise, with the kind of calm that sounds practiced. Patrick Reed. I froze. This is Abbie Patel. Lucy Baker said you... He knows who I am. He interrupted. I was hoping you'd call. Something in his tone made my pulse stutter. It wasn't kindness. It was certainty, like he'd already decided what would happen next. I'd like to meet, he said. Downtown, the Palmer House. Noon. Before I could respond, the line went dead. I should have ignored it, but curiosity has a cruel way of dressing up as hope. By noon, I was sitting in the lobby of the Palmer House, surrounded by marble pillars and chandeliers that looked like frozen fire. My coat was thrift store thin, my boots scuffed, and my breath still visible from the walk. He saw me before I saw him. Patrick Reed wasn't what I expected. He wasn't old, as I had imagined. Late 30s, maybe. Tall, sharply built, the kind of posture that makes people move out of the way without knowing why. His suit was charcoal, his tie loosened just enough to suggest control disguised as casualness. But his eyes that caught me, gray-blue like steel under winter light, eyes that didn't just look at you, they assessed, measured, filed away. Miss Patel, he said, offering a handshake I was too stunned to accept. Please, sit. I did. My palms were sweating. He didn't seem to notice, or care. He folded his hands on the table. I'm going to be direct, because time is something neither of us can afford to waste. His voice was calm, but I could hear the faintest edge beneath it, a man used to control. I understand your situation. Lucy mentioned your circumstances. You're expecting, correct? I nodded. He studied me for a long moment, like an equation he was solving. I'm not here to offer charity, he said finally. I'm here to offer a contract. The word made me flinch. A contract? He leaned back. Marriage. My laugh came out too loud, too desperate. Excuse me? I need to be married, he said, as though stating a weather report. For personal and legal reasons, my father's estate requires proof of stability before the board renews my position as acting CEO. You, Miss Patel, need security. A home, financial stability, medical care. It's mutually beneficial. His words were cold, surgical. He might as well have been describing a merger. I stared at him, unable to process. You want to marry a stranger? A pregnant stranger? I've done my research, he said simply. You're educated, discreet. You don't have family interference. I don't want affection or attention, only an agreement. I swallowed hard. And what exactly do you get from this? He paused. Freedom from my father's interference and the ability to keep my business intact. He slid a folded sheet across the table, typed clauses, signatures, even a notary line. You'll have your own room, a monthly allowance, full medical coverage. In return, you'll maintain appearances when required. Social events, family gatherings, 6 months minimum. After that, you're free to go. My pulse thundered in my ears. It was insanity, but there was a strange steadiness in him, like he'd built walls around every word. "This is insane," I whispered. "Yes," he agreed, "but it's also practical." For a long time, neither of us spoke. The clinking of silverware from the nearby tables filled the silence. A couple laughed somewhere behind us, and I felt the sound like a punch. Finally, I said, "You don't even know me." He met my eyes, and for a split second, something flickered there. Not warmth, not exactly. Maybe pain? "I don't need to know you," he said softly. "I just need this to work." He stood, placed a business card by the untouched coffee, and added, "If you decide by tomorrow, call me. After that, the offer expires." Then he walked away. His footsteps echoed like a verdict. That night, I sat on Lucy's couch, the contract trembling in my hands, the words blurred with tears. A home, security, medical care, all the things I'd been praying for, now offered by a man who spoke of marriage like it was math. My pride screamed no. My baby kicked as if pleading yes. Somewhere between those two voices, I made the decision that would change everything. I picked up the phone. "Mr. Reed, I accept," I whispered. The first thing I noticed about Patrick Reed's house wasn't its size. It was the silence. It sat on the North Shore, a few miles past the city, an old stone mansion with tall windows that looked out over the frozen lake. From the outside, it could have been a photograph in an architecture magazine, grand, perfect, lifeless. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar and something sterile, like a place that had forgotten what warmth felt like. The morning after I said yes, a car had come for me, black, sleek, quiet. The driver didn't speak. He handed me a folder that contained my new name, Abbie Reed, and a simple gold band in a small velvet box. The wedding was over before I could even understand it was happening. No dress, no flowers, no music. Just signatures, witnesses, and a pen that felt heavier than it should have. When the clerk asked if we wanted to exchange vows, Patrick said flatly, "It's a contractual union, not a sentimental one." I should have run then. But I didn't. I told myself I was doing it for Noah, for survival. Still, as I stood in that echoing courthouse, looking at the man who was now my husband, I couldn't shake the thought. I married a monster. He didn't drive me home afterward. He sent his assistant. When I arrived at the mansion, he was already there, waiting in the marble foyer with his hands clasped behind his back. "There are few rules," he said, without a hello. "You'll have the east wing. It's private. My quarters are west. Meals are at 7 and 7. I expect punctuality. You'll accompany me to certain events when required, but otherwise we'll keep to ourselves. Agreed?" His tone made agreed sound like obeyed. I nodded, wordless. He gestured toward the staircase. "Mrs. Holloway will assist you. She's been with the family for decades. She values discretion." Mrs. Holloway appeared then, a gray-haired woman with kind eyes that didn't quite hide her caution. "Welcome, dear," she said softly, but even she seemed afraid to speak too warmly under his gaze. Patrick dismissed her with a nod and turned back to me. "The arrangement begins today. I'll transfer the funds by morning. I suggest you rest." Then he walked away, disappearing down the hallway without looking back. That night, I wandered through the house, trying to memorize its geography. Every room felt curated, like someone had designed it to impress a stranger, not comfort a soul. I touched the grand piano in the sitting room, its keys dusty under my fingers. The photographs on the mantel caught my attention. There were only 3. Patrick as a boy, standing beside a stern man in a suit, Patrick at a boardroom table, and one photo of a woman, smiling, radiant, her hand resting lightly on his chest. His late wife, I realized, the one he never spoke about. I studied her face for too long. There was something tragic about how alive she looked, frozen forever in that moment. At dinner, he barely spoke. The table was long enough for 12, but only 2 settings were used. He sat at one end, I at the other. Between us, candlelight flickered and shadows stretched. He ate mechanically. No conversation, no small talk. I tried once, quietly. "How was work?" He looked up as if the question confused him. "Efficient," he said, and went back to his meal. The silence grew so thick, it felt like it had weight. When I excused myself, he only nodded, still cutting into his steak with surgical precision. Upstairs, I pressed my hand against my belly and whispered to my son, "We're safe." I lied. That's what matters. But that night, sleep wouldn't come. The house creaked and sighed, as if it too was holding secrets. Sometime after midnight, I heard a noise, a low, broken sound, muffled by distance. At first, I thought it was the wind, but then I realized it was coming from below. Careful not to wake Mrs. Holloway, I crept down the hallway, following the faint light spilling from under the office door. The sound grew clearer. A man's voice, unsteady, cracking. Patrick's. Through the crack, I saw him sitting behind the desk, shoulders hunched, head in his hands. A glass of whiskey sat untouched beside a photograph, the same woman from the mantel. "I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry." The words hit me like a pulse through the floor. Then, as suddenly as they began, the sobs stopped. He straightened, wiped his face, and the mask returned. I backed away before he could see me. My heart was hammering, my mind spinning. Who was this man I'd just married? What had broken him so badly that he'd built his life from ice? Back in my room, I lay awake until dawn, the baby shifting softly beneath my ribs. I stared at the ceiling and whispered to the dark, "Maybe monsters cry too." The next morning, I woke to snow. Thick flakes drifted against the window like ash. The lake below was frozen white, stretching endlessly, like a promise and a warning. For a moment, it was peaceful. Then I remembered where I was. The silence in that house had a heartbeat. It watched you, judged you. Every clock ticked in perfect rhythm, as if even time obeyed Patrick Reed. I kept replaying what I'd heard the night before, the sound of him breaking behind that door, the apology whispered to someone who wasn't there. I told myself I'd imagined it, but the image stayed with me. A man who never smiled, weeping over a photograph. Mrs. Holloway found me in the kitchen later that morning. "You're up early, dear," she said. "Mr. Reed likes his coffee at 7 sharp. Would you like some tea?" "Yes, please." Her kindness was the first warmth I'd felt in days. I hesitated, then asked quietly, "Did he ever talk about her?" She paused mid-stir, eyes flicking toward the hallway. "No one does, Mrs. Reed." That title still felt like a costume I didn't fit into. "I see," I said softly. "Best to let the past rest." But ghosts rarely stay buried. That afternoon, Patrick called for me. I found him in the sunroom, though there was nothing sunny about it. Only glass, frost, and a gray light that made everything look sterile. He stood by the window, staring out toward the lake, his reflection cutting through the cold. "Is something wrong?" I asked. He turned, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. "Mrs. Holloway tells me you were asking questions." My stomach dropped. I didn't mean... "She also says you were in the East Corridor last night, near my office." I froze. His voice didn't rise. That was somehow worse. "This arrangement works because we respect boundaries, Abbie. I don't ask about your past. You don't intrude on mine. Understood?" There it was. The monster. The one who didn't shout, but froze you from the inside out. I nodded, my throat tight. Understood. He studied me for a moment longer, then turned back to the window. "Good. Mrs. Holloway will handle your prenatal appointments. Anything else?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to ask why he was hurting, who the woman in the photo was, why his eyes looked so hollow when he thought no one was watching. But instead, I said nothing. He dismissed me with a small nod. "You may go." I spent the rest of the day trying to disappear. I cleaned, unpacked, organized. I moved through that mansion like a ghost, careful not to make noise. But the walls seemed to whisper things anyway. Memories, regrets, the echo of laughter that didn't belong to me. That night, I found myself wondering again. The house was dim, lit only by the orange glow of the hall sconces. My steps led me, almost without thinking, to the second floor. The West Wing. Patrick's wing. I knew it was wrong, but something in me needed to understand the man I'd tied my life to. The first door was locked. The second opened into a study lined with books. The air smelled faintly of whiskey and cedar. On the desk, papers lay neatly stacked, a pen placed perfectly parallel to the edge. And there, by the lamp, was a framed photograph. Patrick and the same woman from the mantel. But this one was different. They weren't posing. She was laughing, eyes crinkled, arms around his neck. His expression was unguarded, almost boyish, happy. It was the first proof I'd seen that he'd once been capable of joy. I reached out, brushing my fingers over the glass. "Who were you?" I whispered to her image. "And what did you take with you when you left?" Behind me, the door clicked. "Who said you could come in here?" His voice sliced through the air. I spun around. He stood in the doorway, shadows cutting across his face. I'm sorry," I stammered. I just... His gaze landed on the photo in my hand. For a moment, his mask cracked. Pain flashed like lightning across his features, then vanished. He crossed the room, took the frame gently from me, and placed it back on the desk. "Don't ever touch my things," he said quietly. "You don't know what you're holding." I swallowed hard. "Then tell me." For a second, I thought he might. His jaw tightened, his hands trembled just slightly, the smallest betrayal of control. Then he turned away. "She died," he said. "That's all you need to know." I opened my mouth, but he cut me off. "And if you value your place here, you'll forget her name." He left without another word, the door closing behind him like a slammed gate. I stood there shaking, my pulse loud in my ears. But as the silence settled again, I noticed something. A faint smell of lilac in the air. Not from the photo, not from me, from somewhere else in the room. Following the scent, I found a box tucked behind the bookshelf. Inside was a small silver locket, its clasp broken. Inside, a photo. A baby, no more than a few months old. And behind it, an inscription. "Eleanor Reed, forever ours." My breath caught. Patrick hadn't just lost a wife. He'd lost a child. I pressed the locket to my chest, trembling, the truth unraveling like thread between my fingers. Maybe he wasn't a monster after all. Maybe he was just a man who'd forgotten how to live. The lake froze solid that week. Even the wind seemed to give up. I spent the days walking the corridors like a ghost with secrets. The silver locket never left my pocket. I couldn't stop thinking about the baby in that photograph, Eleanor Reed. The name felt sacred, a whisper I wasn't meant to know. Patrick avoided me. We moved through the mansion like two planets caught in opposite orbits. Breakfast trays arrived outside my door. Conversations became schedules pinned to the fridge by Mrs. Holloway. But the silence was louder now, charged with something unspoken. That afternoon, the first snowstorm of March rolled in. Thick, relentless, the kind that erases the world outside your window. I watched from the parlor as flakes blurred the trees into ghosts. Then a sudden kick from Noah made me gasp. Pain rippled through my side, sharp, deep. I grabbed the arm of the sofa. "Not now," I whispered. "Please, not now." Another cramp hit, stronger. Panic surged. I tried to call for Mrs. Holloway, but the house swallowed my voice. I stumbled toward the hallway, clutching the wall, my breath coming in shallow bursts. That's when Patrick appeared at the top of the stairs. "Abbie?" His tone, no anger, just shock, was enough to break something in me. "I think it's too early," I managed before my knees buckled. He was there in an instant. His arms caught me before I hit the floor. The scent of his cologne, cedar and winter, surrounded me. For the first time, his hands trembled as he held me. "Breathe," he ordered softly. "In, out, good. It's probably false labor, but we'll check." He guided me to the sofa, one arm steadying my back. His voice stayed calm, practiced, but his eyes, those steel gray eyes, were burning. "I'm calling your doctor," he said, already pulling out his phone. I reached for his sleeve. "Don't leave me." The words slipped out before I could stop them. Something flickered in his expression, something I hadn't seen before. "I'm not going anywhere," he said quietly, and for once, I believed him. The doctor confirmed it was stress-related. Nothing serious, just exhaustion. Still, Patrick insisted I rest, hovering near the door like a sentinel. After Mrs. Holloway left with the medic, the storm cut the power. The mansion fell into a velvet darkness, broken only by firelight. I sat near the hearth, wrapped in a blanket, the crackle of wood, the only sound. Patrick poured tea, his movements careful. He handed me the cup without a word. Our fingers brushed. His touch was warm, startlingly human. "Thank you," I murmured. He nodded. "You should have told me you were in pain." "I didn't want to bother you," I said. "You made it clear this isn't personal." His jaw tightened. "That doesn't mean I want you hurt." Silence stretched between us, thick as the storm outside. Finally, I asked the question that had haunted me since the study. "She was your wife, wasn't she? The woman in the photograph, Eleanor." He froze. I thought he'd walk away again. Instead, he sat across from me, elbows on his knees, staring into the fire. "Yes," he said finally. "She was my wife and my daughter. The words hung there, heavy and wrong. "I didn't know," I whispered. "No one does. They both died. Car accident. I was driving." My breath caught. "Patrick!" He shook his head. "It was raining. I thought I could make the turn. I saw the headlights too late." The fire popped. He flinched. He continued, voice hoarse. "I don't sleep. Haven't since. My father told me grief is weakness, so I buried it. Buried myself with them." Something inside me cracked open. I reached out before I could think, resting my hand over his. "You're not a monster, Patrick." His eyes lifted to mine, raw, searching. "Aren't I?" The room felt suspended. No storm, no past, just two people, broken in different ways, holding on to the same silence. He didn't pull his hand away. Not right away. Hours later, the power flickered back. I awoke to find a blanket draped over me and the faint smell of coffee. Patrick was gone, but a note lay on the table in his sharp handwriting. "You should rest. The house is big, but you're not alone in it." For the first time, the words "not alone" didn't sound like a lie. Morning came pale and quiet. I found Mrs. Holloway already fussing in the kitchen. Before I could ask where Patrick was, a heavy knock echoed through the foyer. She went still. "Oh dear." "Who is it?" I asked. Her expression darkened. "His father." Through the frosted glass, I saw a tall figure in a black coat, flanked by a driver. The man's posture was pure authority, his face carved from disapproval. Patrick appeared on the landing above us, his expression closing like a door. "Stay upstairs. Whatever happens, do not come down." I clutched the railing, heart pounding. From below, Mr. Reed's voice thundered through the house. "So, this is the wife you chose, Patrick, the pregnant stranger." And just like that, the fragile peace between us shattered.
Mr. Reed's voice was thunder. It filled the marble foyer like judgment itself. "So, this is the wife you've chosen, Patrick? A woman you found on the street? A pregnant stranger?" I stood frozen at the top of the stairs, one hand gripping the banister. Patrick stood below, shoulders squared, his expression stone. For a heartbeat, they looked identical, the same height, the same rigid posture, but the older man's eyes burned colder. "I told you," Mr. Reed continued, "this company, this family, requires stability, not charity. You think parading this girl around will convince the board you've recovered? You've lost your mind." I should have stayed upstairs, but something inside me snapped. The sound of my own name turned into an insult, the sneer on that man's lips. Before I could stop myself, I stepped down the stairs. "I'm not a charity case, Mr. Reed." The room fell silent. Patrick's head whipped toward me. His father blinked in disbelief. "I may not have your wealth, but I'm not here for your approval. I married your son because he offered me a home when I had none. And if that offends you, I can leave." "Abbie," Patrick warned, his voice low, but I couldn't stop. Not now. "No," I said. "You think I wanted this? You think I dreamed of a marriage of convenience? I did it because I believed there was still some good left in him. And maybe I was right." Mr. Reed's face twisted. "Good? He's a disgrace. He killed." "Enough." Patrick's voice cracked like a whip. The sound froze me where I stood. For a moment, the air itself seemed to collapse.
His father's words hung unspoken, but their shape was clear. Killed. Patrick's jaw clenched. Leave her out of this. She deserves to know the truth. Mr. Reed spat. Tell her what really happened. Tell her what your negligence cost this family. Patrick's eyes closed briefly, pain rippling through his face. You've said enough, Father. But I already knew. I'd seen the locket, the photograph, the guilt etched into his silence. Mr. Reed turned to me, his tone dripping with disdain. My son thinks he can fix his shame by buying himself a new family, but monsters don't change, Miss Patel. They just hide behind new victims. Patrick stepped forward, fists tight. Get out. The words came low and deadly. Even Mr. Reed hesitated. For a moment, the two men glared at each other, two versions of the same wound, one old, one unhealed. Then the older man turned toward the door. You'll regret this. When the board finds out, you'll lose everything, including her. He left, the echo of his cane fading into the snow.
Silence. Then Patrick turned toward me, eyes hard. You shouldn't have come down, he said. You made it worse. Worse? My voice shook. He called me a charity case. He called you a monster. Patrick exhaled sharply, pacing. He's not wrong. Don't say that. It's true, he snapped. He's right about everything. Eleanor, the accident. I killed them. The words came out like broken glass. I took a step closer. Patrick, he said, voice cracking. I was driving too fast. She told me to slow down. I didn't listen. 1 second she was laughing, and the next... He stopped, shaking his head. When the car hit the guardrail, I remember her scream. I remembered the sound of glass, and then nothing. Nothing but fire. His chest rose and fell unevenly. He crawled out. They didn't. I covered my mouth. Tears blurred my vision. He whispered, I thought if I kept everything perfect, the house, the business, the silence, maybe it would drown the noise inside my head. But it doesn't. It never will. His voice broke completely then, and the monster vanished. What stood before me was just a man drowning in guilt. I reached out, trembling. You can't keep punishing yourself forever. He looked up, eyes wet and wild. Why not? I deserve it. No, I said softly. You deserve to heal. For a heartbeat, he didn't breathe. Then, as if his body betrayed him, he sank into a chair, elbows on his knees, face in his hands. I knelt beside him. For a long time, we just stayed there. The crackle of the fire, the storm outside, our shared silence. He didn't look at me, but he whispered, almost to himself, I don't know how to be anything else. Then let someone teach you, I said. Let me. Later that night, I found him in the study again, staring out at the lake. His tie was loosened, his eyes distant. He said, I'm sorry for all of it, for how I've treated you. You didn't deserve that. No one ever does, I replied gently. But you can start over, Patrick. You can still choose who you become. He looked at me for a long time, really looked at me. Then he nodded, almost imperceptibly. I don't know why you're still here. I smiled faintly, because maybe monsters aren't born. Maybe they're just people who forgot how to love. He exhaled, a sound somewhere between a sigh and a sob. Then, quietly, he whispered, then maybe I want to learn. But the universe wasn't done testing him. The next morning,
The phone rang. I was in the kitchen when Mrs. Holloway answered. Her face went pale. "It's the hospital," she whispered. "Mr. Reed's father. He's gone." Patrick appeared behind her. For a moment, he didn't move. Then the color drained from his face. He turned toward me, his voice barely a breath. I never got to forgive him. And with that, the man who'd built his life on control finally broke. He collapsed into my arms, sobbing like a child, the storm outside mirroring the one inside him. I held him, one hand on his back, the other on my belly, feeling both lives beating under my palms, the one he'd lost and the one waiting to begin. And for the first time, I realized I didn't marry a monster. I married a man who'd been living with ghosts. After the funeral, the house stopped breathing. The reporters called it a quiet family affair, but there was nothing quiet about grief that deep. It filled the rooms like fog, settling into every surface until even the air felt heavy. Patrick barely spoke for days. He moved like a shadow between the study and his father's office, papers in his hands, glass in the other. The man who once demanded order now sat in chaos. Contracts scattered, curtains drawn, his tie loosened like a surrender flag. I tried to give him space, but silence has sharp edges. It cuts when you walk through it. I learned by now that love, if that's what this was, wasn't always grand declarations. Sometimes it was sitting beside someone who refused to look at you and staying anyway. A week later, the phone rang again. Patrick didn't answer, so I did. "Mrs. Reed? This is Alan Truitt, your husband's attorney. I need to speak with him immediately. It's urgent." When I told Patrick, he barely nodded. 5 minutes later, he was gone. He came back hours later, drenched from the rain that had replaced the snow. His face was ghost white. "What happened?" I asked. He poured himself a drink, hands shaking. "The board froze my accounts. Father's shares passed to them until the audit clears. They think I mishandled the merger." "Patrick," he said too quickly, "it's just business." But it wasn't fine. The empire his father built was collapsing, and he was standing in the ruins trying to pretend it didn't hurt. That night, I found him in the garage, sleeves rolled up, slamming a wrench against a shelf. I gave everything to that company, every hour, every breath, and they still think I'm the villain. The wrench clattered to the floor. I flinched, but didn't move. "Patrick," I whispered, "you don't have to prove anything to them anymore." He turned, eyes wild. "You don't understand. That company is me. Without it, without him, I'm nothing." I stepped closer. "You're not nothing." He laughed bitterly. "You don't know who I am when the control's gone." "Yes, I do." I touched his chest lightly. "You're a man who held me when I couldn't stand, who stayed through the storm. You're a man still capable of love, even if you don't recognize it yet." For a second, something inside him softened. Then he whispered, "You should leave before I drag you down too." I shook my head. "No, Patrick. I didn't marry you for the version of you the world applauds. I married you because I saw the broken one, the one who still wants to live." He stared at me, silence stretching until I thought he'd walk away, but instead he exhaled, long and shuddering, and let his forehead rest against mine. "I don't deserve you." I said, "Maybe not, but you need me." Days blurred. Bills arrived. Calls went unanswered. The mansion felt smaller, the ceilings lower. Then one afternoon, I found the nursery. It had been locked, the door hidden behind stacks of boxes. When I opened it, the smell of dust and lilacs spilled out. Inside were painted walls, pale blue stars, and an empty crib covered by a white sheet. Eleanor's room. I stood there, one hand on my belly, tears streaming down my face.
Patrick's voice startled me. "You weren't supposed to come in here." I turned. He stood in the doorway, expression unreadable. "I'm sorry," I said. "I didn't mean—" He stepped inside, slowly, eyes fixed on the crib. "I used to come here every night after the accident. I'd sit on the floor and try to hear her breathing." My heart broke quietly. He looked at me then. "I built this house to keep everything the same, to trap the past where it couldn't hurt me. But the truth is, it's been killing me." "Then let it go," I said. He smiled sadly. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," I replied. "But holding on hasn't worked either." That night, another storm rolled in. Rain hammering the glass, thunder cracking above the lake. The power flickered again. Patrick found me in the hallway, hair damp, face drawn. "I'm going to the office," he said. "Now? In this weather?" "I need to face them. I can't hide anymore." I followed him to the foyer. "Patrick, wait." He stopped, turned, and for the first time, smiled. A small, real smile. "You taught me that love isn't control. It's courage. Maybe this is mine." Before I could answer, he was gone, swallowed by the storm. He didn't come home that night. I waited by the window until dawn, every shadow outside becoming a fear. When the headlights finally appeared, I ran to the door. He stumbled in, soaked, exhausted, but alive. "They're giving me a chance," he said, breathless. "Not because of me, because of you." "Me?" He nodded. "You showed up at the board meeting, told them what kind of man I was at home. I don't know what you said, but it worked." I blinked in confusion. "Patrick, I never went to any meeting." He frowned. "Then who?" Before he could finish, Mrs. Holloway appeared from the kitchen, smiling faintly. "Some truths don't need meetings, dear. Sometimes they just need witnesses." She looked between us, eyes shining, and left the room quietly. Patrick turned back to me, laughter catching in his throat. "She's been defending me behind my back. For once, that's not a bad thing." He reached for me then, hesitant, as if I'd vanish. "Abbie, I don't know what this marriage has become, but I don't want it to end when the contract does." My heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said, "maybe it started as a deal, but somewhere along the way, you became the only real thing left." I felt tears rising. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "For the first time in years." Outside, the rain eased into silence. The lake shimmered under the first hint of dawn. Patrick took my hands and whispered, "Let's rebuild, Abbie. Not the business, us." I smiled through tears. "Then let's start with the truth." He drew me close, his forehead resting against mine. The air between us smelled of rain and forgiveness. And for the first time, the mansion didn't feel haunted. It felt like home. They say the hardest part of healing is believing you deserve it. I used to think that was just something people said to sound wise. Now I know it's the truth. It's been a year since I first walked through those cold stone doors as someone's wife in name only. Now, as I walk down this same hallway, the air smells of cinnamon and baby lotion instead of cedar and silence. The mansion that once echoed with ghosts now hums with the sound of life. The soft thud of little feet, the creak of floorboards under sunlight, the laughter of a man who once forgot how to smile. Patrick. He's not the same man I married. And truthfully, I'm not the same woman who said yes out of fear. The morning light spills across the nursery as I lift Noah from his crib. He's 8 months old now. Chubby hands, curious eyes, a smile that melts every trace of yesterday's pain. He coos as I whisper, "Good morning, little one." Downstairs, I hear the clatter of dishes. Patrick's cooking again.
He insists on it every Sunday, though the kitchen usually ends up looking like a war zone. When I walk in, he's standing by the stove, sleeves rolled up, trying to rescue a pan of overdone pancakes. He looks up, grinning sheepishly. "Don't say it." "I wasn't going to," I lie, laughing. "You were absolutely going to." There's a playfulness between us now. Tentative at first, but real. The kind that grows from surviving something together. He takes Noah into his arms, kissing his head. The baby grabs his tie, gurgling in delight. Patrick winces, but doesn't pull away. "He's got your determination," he says. "Determination? You mean stubbornness," I tease. Must run in the family. The word family still feels like a miracle. Later, we sit on the back porch, watching the lake thaw under the spring sun. The world looks new again, as if winter finally decided to forgive us. Patrick's voice is soft when he speaks. He says, "I keep thinking about them." I nod. "Because you finally stopped punishing yourself." He turns to me. "No, because you reminded me that love isn't a punishment." For a long moment, neither of us speaks. The wind stirs the water and Noah giggles in my lap. He looks at me, then really looks at me, the way he never could before. "You gave me back my life, Abbie. I don't know how to repay that." I smile. "Then don't. Just live it with me." Sometimes I still catch glimpses of the old Patrick, the quiet, guarded man who hid behind rules and distance. But now, when his eyes cloud with memory, he doesn't shut me out. He reaches for my hand instead. We've built something fragile and beautiful out of everything that went wrong. Not perfection, but peace. Mrs. Holloway still runs the house like clockwork, though now she sneaks cookies to Noah when she thinks we're not looking. Lucy visits on weekends, always with stories from the hospital and too many baby clothes. She says I look lighter these days. I think she's right. One night, after putting Noah to bed, Patrick found me sitting in the nursery. He leaned against the doorway, watching me trace the stars painted on the ceiling. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Marrying a stranger?" I smiled softly. "Only every other Tuesday." He chuckled. That deep, warm sound I once thought I'd never hear. "Seriously," he said, walking closer. "I dragged you into my darkness. You had every reason to run." I met his gaze. Maybe I did, but I also had a reason to stay. He knelt beside me, his hand brushing mine. "What reason?" "Because sometimes monsters just need someone brave enough to see the man underneath." He kissed me then. Not desperate or apologetic, but tender, honest. The kind of kiss that says, "Thank you for staying when I couldn't even stay with myself." Months later, when spring became summer, we decided to open the house to light again. We took down the heavy curtains, filled the rooms with color and laughter. The piano in the sitting room plays again. Badly, thanks to me. But Patrick says he loves the sound. Every corner that once held grief now holds traces of new beginnings. A photo of Noah's first smile, muddy footprints near the back door, coffee rings on the table from mornings too happy to care about perfection. Sometimes, when I catch my reflection in the window, hair messy, baby on my hip, sunlight spilling across the floor, I don't see the frightened woman I used to be. I see someone who learned that love doesn't always arrive wrapped in romance. Sometimes it shows up wearing armor and scars and asks for a second chance. People ask how we met, and I always pause before answering. How do you explain a story like ours? That I married a man I didn't love and somehow found the kind of love that saves? So I tell them this. It started as a marriage of convenience, but love has a way of turning the impossible into the inevitable. Because that's what it was, an emotional love story, born from ashes and rebuilt with forgiveness. A story of two broken hearts learning how to beat again, together. As the sun dips below the lake, Patrick wraps his arms around me from behind, Noah asleep in the crib upstairs. The house is quiet, but not empty. There's laughter in the walls now. And sometimes when the night settles softly over us, I whisper into his chest, "I thought I married a monster, but maybe monsters are just people who forgot how to love." And he always answers the same way. A kiss on my forehead, a smile against my hair, and a whisper I never get tired of hearing. Then thank you for reminding me. If you've made it to the end of my story, thank you. Sometimes the hardest stories to tell are the ones that end in hope, because hope asks us to believe again. I thought I married a monster, but maybe monsters are just people who forgot how to love. And maybe love, the real kind, doesn't fix what's broken. It helps you carry the pieces until you can build something new. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to know where you're watching from tonight. Tell me in the comments, what part of this story spoke to you the most? And if you believe, like I do, that everyone deserves a second chance at love, make sure you subscribe to Possible Hearts and tap that little bell so you never miss another real story like this one. Because here, we believe in love that heals, love that grows in impossible places, and love that always finds its way back home. Until next time,